Okay.
All right, let's talk a little January roster. I want to get your guys' reactions to what we saw, notable inclusions, notable exclusions. Chuck, I'm going to come to you first. I mean, who are you excited to see come into this camp, even though there are a ton of newbies here? And I guess in some ways, because Marko Mitrovic, the U23 coach, is also a part of the coaching staff for this January camp, he's going to be evaluating some players as he starts to put his roster together for the Summer Olympics in Paris in 2024. Or it is 2024. Geez, what do you got for us, though, inclusion?
Well, first, can we all come to an agreement that this is a U23 camp and not a typical January camp that's a full national team camp? I know it's the full team, but this is geared towards Olympics. This is not geared towards Nations League. This is not geared towards Copa America, because, you know, in some instances, there's a possibility of bringing in MLS players that have had incredible seasons that just maybe aren't there yet or haven't played at the international stage, where they get to impress Greg Berhalter and say, hey, maybe you should. I am ready to contribute to a Nations League roster or to a Copa America. And I just want to show you that I'm ready to take that next step. This is more unproven, for the most part, potential, and that some of these younger players are trying to make a case for the Olympics. That's what this camp is for me. Because you see a number of these players don't have the credentials, in my opinion, to make a real first team national team camp. However, given this is the national team for January, I'll say Miles Robinson and DeJuan Jones. Those are the two players who have had a lot of success in MLS, both as a team and individually, like as a collective unit. And so they've proven that they can play with the first team. They have to basically show a lot of these younger players how to conduct themselves, the level that is needed to train every single day, set the tone, set the standard. So I'm excited for those two in particular, because I know both have ambitions to play in Europe. I've spoken to both. They both want to play in Europe at some point in their career.
Is this? Wait, did you say Miles Robinson?
Yes, he signed a short-term contract with Cincinnati. Nothing was like, here's 5 years. It's a 1 year with a 1 year option.
Okay.
It was, you know, okay. January is a very tough window to move, especially as a defender, to go to the English Premier League, which is where he wants to play eventually. So go to the best team in MLS, in his opinion, and you know, they're putting together quite a group. They have an identity. They need a center back. So as long as he can stay healthy, I think it's a great move for him in terms of if you're going to stay in MLS. And DeJuan Jones, again, it's another player who has aspirations to play in Europe. And I know a number of Bundesliga clubs were interested in him. Very,
very Kevin Durant of Miles Robinson to go to the best team in MLS and try to win a trophy and then bounce. I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
Hey, they're trying to get an MLS Cup.
Yeah, no, everybody wins there. Well, we'll see if they end up winning on the field. But yeah, I think, well, at least I can agree with you. I want to hear from Jesse as well, that this is clearly a camp that's being designated and more emphasis on the U23s and to that unproven talent in some ways. Not that it's unproven. Clearly, they have done enough to warrant this consideration into camp. But can they play at a level with the full national team coaching staff watching them, and obviously with a game against Slovenia as well on the 20th? Jesse, any surprise inclusions for you in this 25-man roster?
Yeah, I mean, listen, from my perspective, I don't know every single player, right? Some of these young guys are on MLS rosters, and I don't get to watch MLS every week. I had to go and Google some names just to like familiarize myself with exactly.
Jesse, I think some of them were born after you retired, by the way.
No, it's true. And you know, I'm 6 years removed from the league. So a lot of these guys, I may have worked with them a long time ago with the U14s or U15s youth national teams, but even then I think they're too young. So, but I'm excited to see what the camp looks like and then ultimately what the game will look like. I think the Slovenian roster will also be really light on big names, but has potential to be a good matchup of two young teams going at each other. Yeah, I mean, I know Tolkien and I know Brian White. So obviously, Brian was a guy that was young when I was at the New York Red Bulls, and someone who was from the New Jersey area and we really liked and thought had big potential. And obviously he's had a really good season with the Vancouver Whitecaps. John Tolkien is a big personality. I think an important young player to be evaluating, because as a left back, we don't have a plethora of young backs that we can play at that position. That's a little Three Amigos reference there for you guys, a plethora, Jefe. All right. And then Roman Celentano, right? I think we don't always talk about goalkeepers here, because none of us are goalkeepers. And I thought about, we represent, we have a back line representative, a midfield representative, and a striker representative. And so maybe we need to have a guest on the show once in a while that's a goalkeeper.
They're crazy, man. You never know what comes out of their mouth.
Yeah, that's true. But that could be entertaining as well, Jimmy. So anyways, but I think he's a high potential young goalkeeper who is establishing himself with Cincinnati. I think that he's a guy that you could potentially seeing not just on the Olympic team, but establishing himself in the future with the first team. So I think this is his first chance to be in a national team camp, and I think he'll show well.
Okay, I like the Brian White shout in particular. He's 27 years old, coming off 20 goals and 5 assists for the Vancouver Whitecaps in all competitions this season. And really, as a 27-year-old, that was the first time I got called into a camp. And 18 months after I got called into that camp, my first ever camp, I was playing in the World Cup. So there's a huge opportunity. And I know this camp is a little bit different than before, but to be around the coaching staff and to show that you might have a little something that could add to the bigger group is what I set out to do. I kept my goals manageable and still within reach, and just tried to be a little bit better than the people I was competing against. And I want to be if I'm looking at this, I'm walking into this camp, what I would think about as a player is I need to be, or I want to be, one of the best players here. I need to make sure that I am the creme de la creme of these 25 players, so that I can potentially get a chance into the next group and then continue to just take step by step. I'm sure we'll see how they're all approaching it, but that's, I think, was the best way for me to manage that. And Brian White's an interesting one for him. I'm pulling for him because he's got that late bloomer tag, which I have. And I parlayed that into some fun experiences and some big games. So that would be my surprise inclusion. I was excited for Brian White in particular. Now let's get to exclusion. Chuck, I'm coming back to you. Any big surprises of players that were left off the list? You have a couple to pick from: Jesus Ferreira, Jordan Morris, Brandon Vasquez. Anybody else that stands out for you?
No, I am surprised that Jesus Ferreira is not on this roster. Just given that he's been one of the players that Greg has admired throughout his tenure, and just in terms of giving opportunities, calling him up. He's gotten a considerable amount of caps. He was a main part of the World Cup qualifying team. So for him to not be in this camp, I'm a little bit shocked. So I don't know if there's any other details about him not being included. Is there potential transfer? Is he injured? But if he's 100% healthy, that for me is a glaring exclusion.
Yeah, that's I feel like there's more to it. I mean, Walker Zimmerman is another notable exclusion, but he's coming off an Achilles injury that had been bothering him throughout the season. There always seems to be a little bit of a note. Brandon Vasquez looking to finalize his deal to go down to Mexico with Monterrey. So there's all these little things, but I haven't really heard anything from Ferreira's perspective. Jesse, how about you? Any name that you thought should be in there that wasn't?
Yeah, I think you guys named some of them. I would also include Aaron Long. Not sure what's happening with him, but I think obviously he's 31 and getting a little bit older, but potential for him to be part of this group. And we'll talk later about the Olympic team, but I think there's some connections that you could make there. So it does seem to be a really young group. And with the eye on the Olympics, I think, it makes sense that some of the older guys that we would normally see in a January camp or expect to see in a January camp aren't there this time.
You could throw in Roldan as well, right? Roldan and Morris. Yeah, that's Seattle crew.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in Jalen Neal, who was hurt with the Galaxy the second half of the season in MLS. From what I understand, is a hernia surgery. I would expect him to be back by now, since it happened in July, August, September area, and he's not. And I feel like he's got some tremendous upside. So for him,
what about your guy Josh?
Josh, which one?
Winder.
Josh Winder. Listen, I was hoping he would be in, but he's not, because he completely disappeared when he went to Benfica. So I don't know. I was hopeful he would be in. just to see where he is, get a temperature of how things are going for him, bring him into the group, maybe get his energy up and his, because sometimes a little bit of that confidence needs to come from someplace, especially if you're by yourself somewhere in a club and it's not going well for you. But no Josh Winder at the moment. But Jalen Neal, I thought was a bit of a surprise, mainly from I just thought he'd be recovered from his injury at this point. But probably a conversation happening with the Galaxy as to where he is. And if he's not 100%, it's not worth risking him. But he was part of the January camp in 2023, and I thought he did well. And I want to see more of Jalen Neal